In 1996, Oji Hirori and his team at Red Company were delighted to find that their years of struggle in developing Sakura Wars had been a massive success, with their game becoming one of the best-selling games on the Sega Saturn and becoming a cultural icon in Japan. With fans clamouring to see more of the Imperial Combat Troupe, could creator Oji Hirori and his team create a successful sequel? Now, just a reminder that this Sakura Wars 2 retrospective was brought to you by my lovely patrons like Cameron Strauss and Echolocation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content, link in the description below. With fears that the original Sakura Wars was going to be a commercial failure, the team at Red Company did not originally have any major plans for a sequel. However, following the game's record sales, it became clear not just to the developers but the whole of Red Company that they were onto an absolutely winning formula. As a result, they quickly moved to turn Sakura Wars into a marketable franchise. This included the spin-off puzzle game Hanagumi Tyson Columns, as well as a 4-part OVA set around the events of the original game. However, the obvious move was to create a sequel. Using the game files from the original Sakura Wars, the team was quickly able to develop this new game in a fraction of the time that the original game took. As for the developers of this new game, it was mostly the same team as last time, with series creator Oji Hirori returning as general producer, while Kohei Tanaka would return to do the music. Meanwhile, Kosuke Fujishima would return in the arts department to help design the new members being added into the Imperial Combat Troupe. With the sequel using the original game as a base, the team sought to more tinker around the edges when it came to the gameplay rather than implement drastic changes. This included things like evolving dialogue responses in the lips and new commands in the battle sections. As for the story, the team sought to keep the setting to Tokyo and set it 1 year after the events of the first game, with pretty much all of the original characters returning. As for the story's theme, the team wanted to create a more darker plot using the infamous February 26th incident as a basis for the plot. This failed 1936 coup saw multiple politicians killed by radicals in the military, and inevitably weakened the civilian government's ability to rein in the army as they pursued ever-increasing expansionist agendas. A strong theme which emerged in the plot was around the characters not throwing their lives away for the sake of victory. This theme was encapsulated in the game's subtitle of Kimi Shinintamo Koto Nakare, or Thou Shalt Not Die in English. This subtitle got its name from a Russo-Japanese war poem written by Yosano Akiko, in response to the fear that her then-serving brother might voluntarily partake in suicide attacks for the Japanese army. Sakura Wars 2 Thou Shalt Not Die would first be announced for the Sega Saturn in October of 1997, just after the first game's 1 year anniversary. It came out to Japanese audiences on the 4th of April 1998, making it one of the last games for the then Sega Saturn, as Sega would go on to release a brand new Dreamcast console at the end of the year. With the first game not getting an English release, it didn't make much sense to localise this direct sequel. The game would, however, get a Chinese and Russian port like the previous game. There was apparently an attempt to localise the PSP dual port of the first two games, however Sony would not approve the project. However, the team responsible for localising the first game would come to the rescue for us Western fans. Beginning 2.5 years after the first game was translated, the team would take around 3 years of work, releasing the finished product in early 2025. So a big shout out to the team for making both the Saturn Sakura Wars games playable in English, with a special thanks to team member Endstream, who helped me out both in getting the fan translation working on my computer, as well as discussing the translation process with me. Without further ado, let's dive into the story. The story begins in the ruins of Siema Castle out in Tokyo Bay on a stormy night 2 years after the events of the first game. Here we see a mysterious masked figure shot with a mystical sword which he uses to revive the corpse of Aoi Satan. The next day, the storm is cleared and we meet Ichiro Ogami, who has just spent the last year out at sea training with the Navy. He's been called back to Tokyo by Iki Yoneda, commander of the Imperial Combat Troupe. On a boat ride down the river, Yoneda informs Ogami that he wants him back in the capital, as he wants him back as the captain of the troop, and has reassigned him back to Tokyo's theatre despite Ogami's exclamation that he had no say in this. As the boat pulls up to the dock, Ogami is confronted by Sumire Kanzaki. Now, a note, this is an event that is decided which character you chose to become closest to at the end of the first game, so the events might differ for you if you're playing. Sumire and Ogami exchange pleasantries at the dock before they head to the theatre as a couple. At the theatre, Sumire apologises to Ogami as the news has recently reached her that her grandfather is gravely ill and thus she needs to rush home. And with that, she is led into a car and driven off. Sad that Sumire had to leave just after their reunion, Ogami enters the theatre to run into Sakura Shinjuji and Iris Chateaubriand, who are super excited to see Ogami again. The two explain that the rest of the team are currently overseas, with Kana in Okinawa, Karan in China, and Maria in New York. Following the introduction at the door, Ogami is able to wander around the theatre to reacquaint himself with the place, as well as check out some of the redevelopments which have taken place. Along the way, Ogami runs into the other staff members at the theatre and they all reacquaint themselves with one another. After getting changed back into his theatre gear, Ogami is invited to the dressing room, where the rest of the team has thrown him a welcome back party. At the party, Yoneda surprises the group by informing everyone that a new girl from Italy has joined the group. Orihime Soletta then enters the room and introduces herself to the team. While she initially comes across friendly, she soon takes a distrust of Ogami, telling him that she doesn't trust Japanese men. After exchanging a few brief words with Ogami, she then decides to get up and leave the party, much to the surprise of everyone else. That night, Ogami discovers a buzzing machine in his room, and activating it finds out it's a communication device. He is then greeted by Karan, and the two exchange pleasantries before suddenly Kana jumps onto the chat, followed by Sumire and Maria, and together they all bicker with one another, while at the same time trying to welcome Ogami back to the theatre. Following the call, Sakura shows up at Ogami's room and offers to do the night patrol with him. Sakura suggests they invite Orihime along as well in order to hopefully make amends for the party's disruption. Agreeing to Sakura's request, the two head to Orihime's room and are able to encourage her to join them on the night patrol around the theatre. The next day, Ogami meets the girls practicing their lines for an upcoming play. However, much to the others' annoyance, Orihime refuses to practice, citing that such work with amateurs is beneath her. Ogami comes over to berate Orihime for her unprofessional behaviour, when suddenly the alarm goes off, summoning all the girls beneath the theatre for battle as enemies are approaching. In the ready room, Ogami is surprised to see Orihime with her own unique uniform and spherical armour called an Encyclid. Yoneda explains that Orihime was originally part of a prototype team called the Star Division, which predated the Imperial Combat Troop. Keen to show her superior skills to the group, Orihime rushes off to face the enemies. Ogami and the other girls find Orihime plowing through the enemies with ease. Helping her out, they successfully defeat the first wave of enemies. Suddenly, to the group's surprise, Aoi Satan appears before them, despite his supposed death 2 years ago. Not knowing the danger he represents, Orihime engages Satan, only to be struck down. Satan then goes for the killing blow, only to be stopped by Ogami. Now working as a team, Ogami and the girls are able to defeat Satan for a second time. Celebrating their victory, the group is suddenly surprised to see the mortally wounded Satan still standing. Satan begins telling the group that Tokyo is a cursed city, and despite the fact that he may fall, they will never save the city. Suddenly a sword plows through Satan's back, finishing him off. The sword belongs to a mysterious masked man. When Ogami asks the name of the man, he simply responds by calling himself the Demon King before disappearing. Despite the ominous end to the fight, the team return back to the theatre to celebrate their win, but deep down they know they have another set of tough battles ahead of them. And with that, the story continues from there as the Imperial Combat Troop find themselves dealing with demonic assaults and political coups as they try to keep Tokyo safe for a second time. In general, Sakura Wars 2 doesn't change a huge amount from the first game when it comes to presentation. We once again have a 10-chaptered story taking place over 3 discs this time, which Ogami and the Imperial Combat Troop once again find themselves saving Tokyo from another demonic force. Gameplay is once again split into Adventure Mode and Battle Mode. Adventure Mode plays out much the same as it does from the first game, where you take the role as Ogami as you navigate yourself around the theatre as well as a bunch of other locales both inside and outside of Tokyo. The theatre has some major renovations since Ogami last entered it. While the main layout is still the same, the theatre now has several new rooms such as a music room, games room and courtyard. Characters also have been given additional costumes and poses to make exchanges more visually interesting. New to the adventure mode is the new clock system. When exploring around the theatre, you will have a clock being displayed in the top corner of the screen. Each time you enter an area or exchange a conversation, 5 minutes on the clock will pass. As Agami, you'll need to keep an eye on the time, as you will often need to be at specific locations at specific times or risk facing an angry colleague. Once you do get into these conversations, you'll find the game once again goes into first person mode and the live and interactive picture system or LIPS returns. As per usual, you as Agami will have the option to respond to questions asked with anywhere from 2 to 3 options, while often on a timer in which no response will be given if the timer runs out. These responses once again can affect the affinity of the main female cast members, with this affinity affecting how the characters perform in battle. However, new to Sakura Wars 2 is the evolving dialogue responses. In certain cases, the lips will have 2 timers, with responses changing if the first timer runs out. This can unlock new responses as well as delete others, thus it becomes a bit of a game if Agami should respond immediately or gamble on a better response appearing at the risk of losing a good response. Along with the evolving responses, Agami now has a personality bar. This bar is displayed at the bottom of the screen and will initially begin half pink and half blue. If Agami flirts or makes jokes, you'll build up the pink bar. Meanwhile, if Agami acts seriously or gentlemanly, he'll build up the blue bar. This bar will then influence conversations down the road as the characters will see Agami in different lights, depending on how he's previously acted. Going over to the characters, pretty much all the characters from the first game return, including all 6 of the female combat troop members. However, along with Sakura, Sumari, Maria, Iris, Koran and Kana, we also have the 2 new characters in the aforementioned Orihime Soleta and Reni Milstrasse. Orihime, for the most part, is a chatty young lady who airs an aura of fine beauty. While she appears friendly, she does have a bit of a superiority complex like Sumari, and also has a strong distaste of Japanese men, which causes her to initially not trust Ogami in the slightest. Meanwhile, Reni is a somewhat cold and emotionless individual, with a mind completely focused on their roles in tactical planning for the combat troop. While initially appearing as a young boy, Reni is actually an androgynous young woman, which does catch the group a bit by surprise later in the game. Alongside the new characters, we also have a bunch of minigames to play around with, which can be a bit of a fun distraction even if you're limited to when you can play them. However, the main gameplay comes in with the battle sections. Like in the first game, chapters will almost always end in a battle between the Imperial Combat Troop and a member of the new demonic group called the Black Demons. These once again occur around a series of locales both inside and outside of Tokyo. Before a battle commences, Ogami will have the choice of 2 battle plans to engage in. These battle plans differ from battle to battle, but usually break down into a defensive plan around protecting civilians or an offensive plan about wiping the enemy out. Once a plan is decided, the troop will deploy to the map based on the decided plan to engage the enemy. Battles for the most part use the same gameplay system from the first game. Maps are still grid-based combat arenas with actions decided in turn-based order. However, the order is no longer all of your characters followed by all of the enemy, as we now have the new N-Sync lead spherical armors used by Orihime and Reni. These heavy armoured mechs are more powerful than the rest of the team's Kobu, but come at the cost of moving slower. Thus in combat you often find different units being able to move at different times with relation to the enemy. This somewhat spices up the combat as you can no longer arrange all of your troops in one go. When it does come around to one of your unit's turns, you'll find a pretty similar set of options alongside the new UI, showing your character's current status in combat, be it fully engaged, near death, etc. Like last time, you have the option of either moving, attacking or defending, and you can choose to do 2 of these 3 actions on your turn. Attacks are once again split into regular, special and combo attacks, with the latter 2 costing 100 points of your character's special gauge. When it comes to Ogami's turn specifically, you also have the option of the new captain commands. These are split into 4 categories, those being wind, forest, flame and mountain. With the exception of the Forest command, which acts as a neutral stance, the other 3 will buff one stat at the cost of another. Wind boosts move at the cost of defense, Fire boosts attack at the cost of defense, and Mountain boosts defense at the cost of move. This will permanently take effect until Ogami makes a new command, or if a command has been inactive for a while, a party member might ask Ogami to change it on their turn, to which Ogami can oblige if he wishes. Along with the new captain commands, we now have the new pair-up attacks, which characters within range of an enemy might assist your controlled character during an attack, depending on their affection for one another. This ends up amplifying the damage done to the enemy and can really help and whittle down the boss's health bars. We also have the return of special attacks, now supporting brand new animations, which we can now see the 3D models of our character's spherical armour in beautiful 20p. Speaking of the spherical armour, obviously I need to talk about the new N-Sync lead pilots by Orihime and Reni. Orihime plays rather similar to Iris, having a multi-hitting attack that hits all enemies in range. Unlike Iris, Orihime can hit enemies up to 3 squares away at the cost of not being able to hit up close enemies. For her special, Orihime targets up to 5 enemies next to each other in an attack similar to Karan's mortar. Reni meanwhile plays very similar to Sumeri, using a which can hit enemies up to 3 squares away, with her special delivering a powerful attack at the same range. Alongside the new characters' attacks, some of the existing casts have also had a handful of tweaks made to their attacks, such as Iris' special now healing her along with everyone around her. But that's enough about the combat, let's discuss the music. Kohei Tanaka returns to compose the music for Sakura Wars 2. For the most part, we have a completely new soundtrack from the first game, with new battle themes and cutscene tunes. In general, there's been an addition of more modern instruments over the more classical instruments heard in the first game. Arguably one of the biggest additions are brand new themes for each of the cast members, which helps give them more personality in the story. As for the game's voice acting, we have all of the original game's cast returning, alongside new voice actors for Orihime and Reni. Voice acting is again somewhat limited, with the major cutscenes being fully voiced, while a lot of the smaller exchanges are not. Alongside the voice acting, we also have the return of 2D animated cutscenes done by Production IG, which are used throughout the game's chapters as well as in the next time teasers. However, arguably the most iconic 2D animation is the game's opening cinematic, now played to the updated theme of Geki Tekoku Kagenkidan Kai. This new version adds some new fanfare to the opening riff, as well as has a slightly faster feel to it. It also makes more use of the other cast members' voices outside of Sakura when it comes to the chorus. As for the game's opening, it has definitely grown on me. While the opening shot of the girls doing stage plays is rather strange, once it gets going, it is arguably the best opening in the series. From the amazing transition shot of the game's antagonists right into the shots of the main girls in battle, I today think this might possibly be the best opening in the series. As you may notice here, there doesn't really feel like there's anywhere I find Sakura Wars 2 to be a lesser game than the first one, which really summarises my thoughts of this game as a whole. While it doesn't drastically change the format, I genuinely had a much greater time with Sakura Wars 2 than I did with the first game. It's clear as day that the developers were much more confident in the format, especially in the story. I had a blast with this game's plot, from the more political nature to the more creative ways they put Ogami into hijinks with his fellow female party members. The new characters of Orihime and Reni also add new character tropes to the group without feeling too much of a rehash of previous characters, and they also offer interesting new ways to play in battle. If I had one issue with the game, it would be the somewhat easiness I found in the battle sections. With Ogami's mountain command, your team is easily able to tank through bosses' special attacks without even defending, and this makes laying into them very easy. I don't know if I benefited majorly from coming into this game so soon after finishing the first game, but man, the battles did not really challenge me that much. Well, at least for the early part of the game. While the battles were easier, they thankfully fixed up most of the route mapping issues I had in the first game, with my party members not having to traverse as far around the map to get to places, plus the wind command allowing for quick redeployments. Despite the battles being easier, the boss fights are still fun thanks to a much better cast of villains, with bosses this time appearing in multiple cutscenes and battles, as opposed to the first game's bosses which almost always died in the chapter they were introduced. Alongside that, the new side characters help make the world of Sakura Wars that much bigger as we move international for the next game. So next time we journey to a new city as well as a new console as we dive into the first of the Dreamcast Sakura Wars games with 2001 Sakura Wars 3 Is Paris Burning.